Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is James Welsh, and I have an announcement for the international media and for the UFO community, and especially for all the jabberwocks, grifters, disinformation agents, con men, fraudsters, and codology merchants, and jabberwocks within it. And also to all the alleged investigative reporters and UFO journalists out there. It's now the 2nd of July 2026. The time here in Glasgow is 1:12 GMT. And a bit about myself. I am a multiple event close range eyewitness, and I am also the author of this book here, Corroborating Evidence, the UFO Investigation of the Millennium. It was published on July 8th, 2014, and as a result of a series of close-range UFO encounters that I personally experienced along with others during December 1999. Now, during the course of that month, I had encounters on December the 4th, 10th, 11th, 14th, 15th and 25th of December. Now let's just have a look here. This is the... let me just go back. This is www.dove.government publications UFO reports in the UK. So we go here to December 1999 and we look through the entire PDF for 1999 and we come down to December and we have the 15th of December at 3:30 AM Glasgow, and the report reads as follows. Multiple bright lights, occasionally red and green, some are moving and flashing, streaks of light, erratic, occasionally in formation and then splitting. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this went on to become the longest, most detailed UFO report for the entire year. Now, what I want to very quickly point out here is the descriptive terms that I gave here. Occasionally red and green. That's quite important because it tallies with this report up here. These 4 reports, I should say. We have here from November the 29th, I believe. Yep, 29th of November. And we are talking here about all in Essex. We have Tilbury and Chadwell St Mary in Essex, and then we have another one there 20 past in Essex. So we've got 5 reports there, all in the same geographical location. So we have the first report, 1 green, red and white lights, and we have the next report with a green hue surrounding it, and then we have twinkling red and green in the 3rd report, and then we have the 4th report, flickering green and red. Now that is 4 police officer reports submitted to the British Ministry of Defence for November the 29th, 1999. Now, earlier that morning, there was a woman by the name of Sandra Whelan in Livingston that also reported UFO activity and managed to capture it on her video camera. If you bear with me a moment, I will pull that report up. I don't believe it's listed in official reports. So we have here... There we go, I was right on it. Let me just pull this up a bit. So this was taken on December the 2nd in Shanghai, China. But over here we have Sandra Whelan's. There she is with her camera in her hand, and the footage paused on her television set, and there is a blow up of the object that she captured. Now, if you notice here, it's very crinkle cut, and the reason for that will become very, very apparent much later in time, but for the moment I just want to talk about these documented cases. Now, this PDF, the MOD PDF, was not uploaded until 2010. My report was submitted on December the 15th, albeit it's a couple of weeks after these police reports, but granted, given the fact that the PDF was not uploaded until 2010, I had no possible way of knowing about these 4 individual police reports where they are mentioning green and red lights on these objects as stated in my own report. Now, so this was me being a concerned citizen and phoning Glasgow Air Traffic Control and submitting that report, and that was that. But on January the 6th, 2000, I received my reply from the British Ministry of Defence, who stated in the letter to me that unless there is corroborating evidence of hostile or unauthorised foreign military aircraft, we do not look into these reports, as we are not an aerial identification service. However, if more funds and resources were diverted to us, then we might be in a better position. However, we are satisfied that there was nothing to it. But that reply, I knew, was a barefaced lie, because during that month I observed repeat military involvement on December the 11th and 15th, where I seen a squadron of RAF Tornadoes flying extremely low over the controlled airspace of Glasgow City. So all of these sightings played out, and I carried on with life for the next 2 years, or year, shall we say, into 2001. And when I came across UFO magazine and decided to get in touch with the editor, Graham Birdsall, who encouraged me to write an account of what happened. I also then contacted Scotland's leading paranormal expert, Ron Halliday, who ran a column in the Scottish Evening Times called the Scottish X-Files. So I contacted Ron, and Graham sent him my written account, and Ron started to correspond with me, and I arranged a meeting on February the 15th, 2002, and Ron met up with all the other eyewitnesses that were involved in the series of events that I went on to report and subsequently investigated. Now, cut a long story short, I found aliens in orbit on official NASA documentation. So the entire UAP press conference and UAP study conducted by NASA was just political theatre. It was all part of a global MK Ultra psyop on the population of planet Earth to reinforce the false belief that they don't know. And this is all we've been getting ever since Leah Elizondo came forward in 2017 claiming to be the director of an organisation called ATIP, which was supposed to stand for the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Programme. But as I very quickly came to learn, it actually stands for another attempt to impart Piffle. And the acronym UAP created by Jay Stratton, a Pentagon UAP expert insider. Jay Stratton, a man incapable of checking the blink rate of a commercial 737 Airbus against his Flying Pyramids footage. Him and David Grush, both incapable of taking literally seconds out of their life to cross-reference it against known knowns. Jay Stratton, he came up with UAP, and UAP stands for Universally Accepted Piffle. So I am someone who knows better, and my experiences taught me quite a lot. Now, I had missing time on December 11, 1999. I'm not saying that I was abducted, but I am saying that I have time that was unaccounted for. And it very well could be down to more than I am aware of, put it that way. Okay, so we'll try and get through this as quickly as possible for you all. So when Ron left the house that night on February the 15th, 2012, I started to go into a bit of a panic attack, and I said, what do I do next? What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? What should I be doing next? And Ron says, look, just keep researching, keep writing, keep at it. So I did, and eventually I started off by taking a leaf out of the Black Vault, the Black Vault's book, which is run by John Greenwald, and I started to write off letters of inquiry to Strathclyde Police, the MOD, the CAA and the RAF, and eventually I got to the point where I posed the exact same question to the British Minister of Defence and to the CAA, which is a Civilian Aviation Authority, and I asked both parties who had remit over military aircraft flying over the controlled airspace of Glasgow City Centre, or Glasgow City I should say. And the MOD told me it was not under their remit to get in touch with the CAA, and the CAA told me it wasn't under their remit to get in touch with the MOD. So that's when I realised that I was on an information merry-go-round, as it were, and I decided to hop off because I was going round in circles, and I knew that I wasn't going to get anywhere by making letters of inquiry. But by that point I'd already gathered quite a bit of correspondence from all these different parties. But so by then, 2003, I decided to take a completely different approach to looking into this, and I began to look into sighting events that occurred during December. So I came across the Betty Cash and Vicky Landrum event, and also the Rendlesham Forest incident, and then I decided that I was going to start going right back through history and looking for events that took place exclusively during December. But then I realised that was a bit of a frivolous and narrow-minded approach, and decided to take a bird's eye view of what was actually taking place around the globe during the same time as my own observations took place. That gave birth to the UFO investigation of the millennium. Now, this is where I got the title of my book, Corroborating Evidence, the UFO Investigation of the Millennium. So that is where that comes from. And the artwork cover here, you can see the bodywork of the shuttle, as well as the silhouette of the Tornado aircraft, as well as a UFO. So it's nighttime, UFO, aircraft, and then overlaid over that is the STS-103 mission patch. Now that was designed by Claude Nicollier, the Swiss-born astronaut who was a mission specialist on STS-103, and is also the astronaut responsible for taking the photographs during Hubble's redeployment on December the 25th, 1999. So I began by looking into UFO reports around the world, and started to go right back in time, as well as starting to look at December 1999 and started to build up a chronological spreadsheet, which I came to realise that with all the different time zones around the world, it was the easiest way to format it for me was to turn everything into a GMT timeline and list the local time and then the time difference. So that gave me a chronological, linear timetable of events around the world, because initially I was just trying to track the movements of these craft around the globe and see if I could find patterns, and that is exactly what happened. Now, apart from being able to realise the best way to format it was in a GMT timeline, when I did so and I was taking down report after report, I started to notice that there were numerous dates throughout December 1999 whereby 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 UFO events were all taking place simultaneously, and that is when I started to realise that the sheer scope of UFO activity was much broader than I first anticipated, and involved a lot more craft than just one or two kicking around. There was quite a big worldwide presence taking place. So there was a sort of world tour, if you like, during December 1999 by a visiting alien intelligence. So fast forward to 2010, I learned about 3 NASA images, 2 in May and then 1 in October. The 2 in May were frames STS 103-734-58 and 59, and then in October it was frame 73. So frame 73 contains a solid structured physical craft, and here it is here. This is the gateway to astronauts' photography of the Earth. And in 2010 I learned about a video which contained frames 58 and 59, and in frame 59 there is a blue white oval shaped UFO, the same thing that I had seen personally over the course of that month, and which I had been tracking for a decade by that point. So the hairs on the back of my neck and my arms and everything were standing on end when I first saw it, but I could not verify that these were not doctored in any way, shape or form. All I had at the time was a YouTube video, so, and then the one in October. So it wasn't until 2 years later, they were very interesting, but it was ambiguous and it was a grey area, so I set it aside and forgot all about it and carried on with the historical algorithm that I was running, looking for similar descriptions. And that's exactly what I did with my own written account and my personal report to the British Ministry of Defence. I used the same descriptions. I used the descriptions that I had already documented and looked for similar, if not mirroring descriptions in other reports, and then highlighted them just to say, look, there's what I said I saw, and there's what Mary Jane and Bob all saw. So you don't need to take my word for it anymore. We have, all these individual eyewitness testimonies that are all repeating the same characteristics I personally observed. So that's how I went about it at first. I just thought, well, this is as good as it gets. I thought I could only say, look, there's what I had to say, and there's what everybody else had to say. And when you look at it all, when you weigh it all up, you can see that there is a repeating pattern through all these individual reports. So that was that until I got to 2012. And by that point I had completed a 101 year historical sweep going all the way back to 1898, all the way through to 1999, and had started building up the timeline of UFO reports that I wanted to draw attention to. And at the time it still was just a private project whereby I was just trying to understand a little bit more about my own encounters, and obviously looking for other reports that mirrored my own observations. So that's where I was until I got to 2012, and I built up the timeline from December the 1st, or November the 29th, sorry, all the way through to the Sandra Whelan's encounter, all the way through to December the 19th. Now, this is where my report on the 15th has relevance, because my report was filed on official MOD documentation 4 days prior to the launch of Discovery on December the 19th from Launchpad 39B to upgrade and repair Hubble. So I was on record even before Discovery got off the ground and left this Earth to go and do this mission. So that's quite relevant, because it establishes that I am not trying to fabricate any of this in any way, shape or form. So the bottom line is that I knew that I had a clear desk in front of me in 2012, and having all my research from 1898, before the birth of mechanical flight, showing that the same characteristics and technological signatures and advanced velocity of these craft before the birth of mechanical flight was ongoing. So that's where I was with the research. It was all the way from 1898 all the way through to 1999, all the way right up to December the 19th. And that's when I remembered the launch of Discovery on December the 19th to upgrade and repair Hubble. And that is when I recalled these NASA images that I had learned about in 2010. Now, because I had an open road ahead of me and no distractions to worry about having to deal with X, Y and Z, I just had a clear road ahead of me, and I decided that I was going to go back and look at these NASA mission images, because I realised that this object, if I was able to go on to determine that it was a solid structured physical craft, then that was the strongest piece of evidence that I had to present to show that there was solid evidence of alien visitation to planet Earth during the build up to the millennium. So that is when I went back and I managed to get the URL links for frames 58, 59 and 73, and this is where I got creative. At the time in 2012, these NASA images were not all discoverable by a Google search, and they weren't indexed properly on the website. So if you had the URL for the frame number, you could access the frame, but if you didn't, you would have a hard time finding it on a Google search if you typed in frame numbers. And again, if you were on the website, you could only access the individual frame that you were looking at. So when I put the 3 URL links into a Word document, because I was working on this timeline all the way from 1898 all the way forward, that's when I realised that all 3 URL links were identical with the exception of the frame number. So this is where I got creative, as I say, and I realised that with them all being identical, I thought, well, what if I just start changing the numerical value of the frame number and hit enter? And in doing so, I was able to legally hack the NASA server. And I say legally hack it because I am using the term very descriptively. Hacking involves finding vulnerabilities in a system and exploiting them, and that is what I did, albeit legally, unlike Gary McKinnon before me in 2001, who actually did hack NASA and the Pentagon looking for evidence of UFOs, and he could only produce words, and I hacked them legally, and I was able to start walking away with the receipts. So with regards to this particular NASA mission image, frame 73, It had been officially cited in 2010 that this was just a reflection, nothing more, nothing to see here, just a reflection. But from the get-go, there was something off. When I would look at this, there was something familiar about it, and for the life of me, I could not put my finger on it. There was something familiar, but again, I would go into a blank space, which is really interesting. Again, with frames 58 and 59, when I would examine them, I would eventually drift into a sort of, my thoughts would just derail until I would go on and look at something else, and then my brain would kick back into gear. Now, so I managed to access the entirety of roll 734, and I went through every single frame that was taken on that roll, and there were quite a lot of anomalies taken earlier on that evening. Frames 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, and then they kick off again from 66 through to 76. So there was a few anomalies on the earlier photos that were taken earlier that evening, but because I was solely trying to determine whether or not this was a solid structured physical craft or a reflection as had been officially cited, I decided to just earmark 10 successive images from frame 66 through to 76 to go on to see if I could perform an analysis and understand whether or not the reflection story held water. Now, this is where it all gets very interesting, because as I went through these 10 mission images, each and every one of them, each one in the sequence showed evidence of this object, with the exception of frame 69, which was odd one out. So I should also add that in 2003 I enrolled in a course at Kildare College, which was an introduction to photography, and when I was there, my lecturer Eric told me that everything that the course taught I had already self-taught myself. So I was really quite taken aback at the fact that my lecturer was like, you're already ahead of the game here with regards to this. But I was learning to develop my own photos, so that was another skill that I didn't have before that. But he says, look, you understand the fundamentals of photography, which is all about the dance, the eternal dance between light and dark. And that is the essence of photography. And he says, and you have an understanding of that. So I was like, right. So I was, walking about, beating my chest and all happy. I was really chuffed at the fact that this guy was like, no, you're quite an accomplished photographer already, and I'm like, whoa. He says, your depth of field, your how to focus, how to frame photos, etc, etc. You're not bad with a camera, son, so I was very, very chuffed. But that knowledge that I picked up at Kildare College with regards to what he said to me about the essence of photography being about the relationship between light and dark, really resonated with me, and that stuck in my head. So that came back into play when I was examining these images in 2012. Now, as I say, all 9 out of 10 of the photos showed evidence of this object, with the exception of the one frame, which was frame 69. And that's when I really put on my Sherlock Holmes hat and started to really take a leaf out of Sherlock Holmes' book, whereby once you eliminate the improbable, only the probable remains. So I applied that to my line of thinking, and I realised that with the object appearing in both frames 68 and 70, it made no sense that the object did not appear in frame 69. And logic then told me that if it appears in frame 68 and frame 70, then it has to be in frame 69, albeit unseen. And that is what spurred a much more in-depth look specifically at that one frame, STS 103-734-69. Now, I spent quite a bit of time working on that, and at the end of August 2012, I noted, so we'll have a look at this before we go any further. We'll just get a look at this. So there's a partial double image, but that is something that I can also explain. This is all to do with the overall operational system of these craft. It's got nothing to do with refraction or a double image being captured. As I said, refraction. It's nothing to do with the multiple panes of glass on the orbiter window. It's got nothing to do with the fact there's something like 5 panes of glass, and then you've got the 2 camera lenses, if not more, considering the lens that would have been on the camera with a zoom lens. So there could have been multiple panes of glass, 8, 9 panes of glass between the photographer and this object. So refraction was always at the back of my mind, but that was eliminated through the course of the investigation I undertook into these mission images. So I don't know if you see here, but there is a pencil thin, very, very, very vague blue line coming along here, and this is a projected laser. Now, if you visit my channel, Corroborated Evidence on YouTube, you will see my 2012 upload where I discuss these lasers on this craft, and you can tell by the enthusiasm in my voice and conviction that I have that I was very much aware that this craft was projecting lasers around it, and that again comes into play with my own up close experiences, and very possibly to do with the missing time that I had, because I had an understanding of how this craft operated right from the outset, even before I really started looking into these. So none of this really, what's the word I'm looking for, formulated until 2021, when everything just catalysed and everything just kind of exploded in 2021, resulting in sharp recall back to my encounters and developing an incredible leap on where I had been previously with all of this research. So the bottom line is that I looked at NASA frame STS 103-734-59, and here is multiple different variations of that frame. Now, I believe this is the original here without any manipulation or anything. Yep, this is as it appears on the NASA server. Now, I don't know if you notice here, but when you look at that, and you just see the interior, the bottom of the window of the orbiter and Hubble, and that's it. It just looks like Hubble and nothing else. But on closer inspection, we get to see that pencil thin line across there, and we have a couple of squiggles here going along the bottom, one along here, one above it, with a line coming over here and a line here. Now, this is ultra important, because it was when I was focused in on these features like so and started to enhance it, that I was just trying to see what these features were in more detail, because I had obviously identified them and was trying to determine what they were. So I was focused in, I was zoomed in and focused on this particular area, and made lighting changes to the image, But I didn't realise until I saved it and the image opened back up that it only first hit me that it wasn't just that one area that I was editing, it was the entire photograph. And when I got the download that I saved, I realised that I had revealed the presence of this solid structured physical object in orbit. Now, I still wasn't sure what this was. Now, I made multiple edits of I kept downloading the same image and editing it, and then I would do it again, and I would make a point of editing it in a different configuration, if you like, to see if I could eliminate this from the picture, but it remained as a constant. No matter how much editing was carried out, this was a constant artifact. So it was nothing to do with the editing process. This was definitely there. And as it turns out, these squiggles that you see up the top, this is all I wanted to do, was bring these out to try and see them in more detail. Now, when I did so, I also revealed this dark circular area here, and also we have this area off to the right hand side of it, and this is where my knowledge of photography came into play. Now, going by official NASA records, it was clear that the redeployment took place during sunrise over Australia's Gold Coast, and that was also a factor when looking at the mission resource highlights tape, because during that you see the bright sunlight filling up the orbiter windows and illuminating the crew while they perform the operation of redeploying Hubble. So I had official NASA documentation and footage which showed that the orbiter was bathed in bright sunlight during the redeployment, and that became very important when going on to understand what exactly was going on with this particular mission image. And again, as I say, my knowledge as a photographer came right into play, and I was looking at this darkened area, and I can remember thinking back to 2012 when actually first looking at this, and straight away my thoughts led me to the fact that this craft did not necessarily have to be symmetrical, and that's really interesting because it turns out that they're not. So I already had that in my head before I even started looking into these mission images properly. So that's really interesting because it turns out I do have really interesting knowledge about these craft and how they operate, and all of this was subconscious, shall we say. It was knowledge without knowing or understanding it even way back then. So this is, as I said, the previous course that I took in photography came into play with my tutor Eric talking about the eternal dance between light and dark, and that's when I started to apply Sherlock Holmes' hat again to thinking what this dark area was. And then it hit me that the reason why there is a dark contrast there is simply down to really simple light physics, and the reason for that dark area is because there is an obstruction which is causing a lack of light to hit that particular surface area. And that's when I had to think, well, if there's an obstruction, what could it be? And then I'm like, well, there's only two things that could really be, and that is the orbiter and Discovery. And then the pin dropped, and that is when I realised that this is the shadow profile of the Hubble Space Telescope, ladies and gentlemen. The upper rounded area there is the barrel of Hubble, and the lower area has an outer 45-degree angle. That is the lower solar array. Further inspection on this in 2021 revealed an inner 45-degree corner with the solar array and a very, very slight differential between the barrel and the lower solar array. So this is when I was like, eureka. I was literally stuck to my ceiling for about 3 weeks and speaking in tongues. Very literally. And that's when I realised that if this was the shadow profile of the Hubble Space Telescope, then that validated that this is a solid structured physical object, because if there was nothing there, there would be no shadow to be cast upon it. It was light physics 101. Objects in direct sunlight cast shadows. So as you can imagine, I was literally stuck to the ceiling for about 3 weeks, because I had spent 12 years looking for corroborating evidence of UFO visitation to planet Earth at that time, and now I had the shadow profile of the Hubble Space Telescope being cast onto the surface area of this object, which proved that it was a solid structured physical object. And not only that, these squiggles are also the same squiggles that appear here on this area here. And the dark recessed area that I just mentioned to you there, that circular area, is present exactly where it should be in relation to the squiggles. So I had definitively identified the same features that appear in NASA frame 73 on frame 69, and therefore was able to tell that the object in frame 73 was sitting directly in front of Hubble and Discovery in frame 69. So that is how I was able to establish that this was a solid structured physical craft and not a reflection as had been officially cited. Well, they are. I'll go for here. So yeah, I then got an email finder program and downloaded that, and then typed in the word UFO, and it would go and do a search for email addresses with the term UFO attached to it, and I got somewhere in the region of 200 email addresses with UFO attached to the email address, and I recorded a video which is up on my website, the one from 2012, I can't even remember what it's called. Excuse me. Caffeine? Oh no caffeine. Okay, I've got a backup plan. I've got a bottle of ginger somewhere. Found it. So I emailed. It was like I was shooting in the dark. Basically, I didn't even know who all these people were, and I sent this mass email out to a lot of people, and very shortly thereafter I got an email from someone called Yari Mikola, who was very interested in meeting up with me and discussing these matters. Now, the email that he sent me had the attachment, because the actual email that it got to was Paula Harris, and Paula Harris was Dr. J. Allen Hynek's personal assistant. And if you don't know who Dr. J. Allen Hynek is, you may as well just switch this video off just now and go and do something else instead. But Paula Harris had got my email and forwarded it on to Yari Mikola. Yari Mikola was a former IBM coding architect who went on to become a NASA contractor and was also contracted to do work for the Department of Defence. So when I found all this out, I was rather intrigued. because he's like, yeah, I used to work for that agency and I'm highly interested in what you have to say. So I was like, ooh. So following the email, Yari got my phone number and he called me from The Hague, and we must have spent an hour and a half on the phone having a discussion about what I had went on to identify on these official NASA mission images. Now, we ended up meeting up 3 weeks later in Edinburgh. He came over to Edinburgh. He was actually looking for a venue to hold a big, massive paranormal conference, and he was looking for venues, so he was over floating about, and that's how we met up. We had lunch in an Italian restaurant, and I had the most basic of Italian food that day. I worked in an Italian restaurant at that time, and we went over, so it was like, oh, I'll have a bowl of minestrone and I'll have spaghetti bolognese. Do you know what I mean? It was like the most, comfort food almost. So Yari said that he would be able to pass my findings on to someone who could do something about it and could go on to check the information that I had came across. And Yari passed my findings on to UFO researcher and high-speed photography expert who worked for National Geographic, Wilbur Allen of UFODC.com. And Wilbur was able to tell me that these things had the same technological signature as anomalies that he had picked out on the Apollo missions. He was saying that there was a certain signature that he had picked up on these Apollo photos that was recurring in the NASA photos. He was saying it's the same phenomenon. Your research mirrors my own findings, and my findings mirror yours. So we've got something here. There's something substantial here. So that was all very interesting. And I then decided to get in touch with MUFON, because I thought, right, okay, I'll get in touch with MUFON, science, the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of all mankind and all that. And I got in touch with Mark D'Antonio, who is their resident imaging video expert. Mr. D'Antonio was of the professional opinion that what I had found was nothing more than a reflection, and I explained it to him in plain English, just the way that I have to you all just now, of the logic and the process and the elimination and all that took place prior to making this announcement. But Mr. D'Antonio, when he disagreed with me, I said, well, look, I says, I've already had someone better qualified than yourself already validate what I have found. And that's when he threw his toys out the pram and told me that he'd 34 years experience, and he knew much better than me, because I was just someone that didn't have his experience, and he had friends that put satellites into space. I don't know what that was meant to mean, but he had friends that put satellites into space. And I'm like, well, you don't really go through a scientific process by just having a go at somebody and making an announcement. But so Mr. D'Antonio and I vehemently disagreed fundamentally, and couldn't have been more polarised on these findings. Now, I knew that I was correct because I had used scientific methodology and understood that the sunrise was occurring over Australia's Gold Coast, shedding light on the orbiter and Hubble, and therefore Hubble was casting the shadow profile onto this area. And on top of that, there we can see the squiggles and that dark recessed area there, which is a match to that. So that told me that this object had changed. Look at this, look at where it is compared to where the photograph is taken. So the photographer is not centred, but he's off to the left of the photograph and panning off to the right hand side. But then when we look at frame 69, we see that the photographer has centred himself and has centred the camera directly ahead. So I was able to tell from these photographs that if this was indeed a reflection, the movement of the photographer and the positioning of the camera, the trigonometry of it all, meant that I overlaid the mission images, and I was able to tell that with the movement of the photographer, if this was a reflection, it would be the object would be moving in the opposite direction and it wouldn't be coming closer. So that was ruled out straight away. And obviously I'd explained to Mr. D'Antonio that the official explanation was that it was a reflection, but I had now debunked that by careful analysis of all 10 mission frames, not just looking at this and making a conclusion, but actually painstakingly going through all 10 and then deferring back to additional information like the mission resource highlights tape and official NASA records talking about how the sunrise was occurring during the redeployment. So this was established to be a solid structured physical craft in orbit on August the 31st, 2012. And as I say, despite the polarised opinion of MUFON's image expert who believed that I was completely wrong and he was completely right, I knew that I was right in following the scientific route with regards to making all these eliminations and knowing exactly what was going on with it. And I think maybe something to do with my own personal observations and the missing time maybe played a part in that, but I wasn't aware of that, obviously. So I've shown you there on the this one, you can see the pencil thin blue line coming along here, and there's another one further down. Try to see where it is. There's another one somewhere here, because it has an upper and a lower one. So there seemed to be some sort of like perimeter around this craft with lasers, and I knew this obviously from the start. But there again on NASA frame 69, in fact that's what I'm maybe thinking, it's on frame 69, we have these two lines and they just seem to stop, which is really interesting because lasers don't generally tend to stop like that, but there's a lot more to it. So that is how I was able to go on to determine that this is indeed a solid structured physical craft in orbit along with Hubble and Discovery during the redeployment operation. Now at the time I thought this was just a flyby which took place, and I thought this thing had been lurking around, and then when they released Hubble into space it decided to come and take a close-up in the event that it could be, some sort of weapon or whatever being released into orbit, and it wanted to come up and take a good look. Now the barrel of Hubble would have been open, so as this thing moved right in front of Hubble, the occupant or the occupants of this particular craft would have been looking at a mirror image of themselves in the reflection of the massive mirror that Hubble has. So that was all very interesting. Obviously they would have known that this was used as an observation device. So I just thought curiosity on the part of the occupants, but little did I know that there was going to be a lot more to it as time went on. Now I think I've spoke for about an hour on this, so that's me brought you up to date with where I got to in 2012 with regards to my initial analysis of the redeployment images. Now, I have went back and I have been very, very, very thorough in my investigations, and I've been able to establish exactly what this is, because it also appears at numerous scores of other historical UFO events stretching right back in time, and I will be having to leave that for another video. But that takes you up to 2012. So 2013 I was at, sorry, with Mark D'Antonio. So knowing that Mark D'Antonio's assessment was 100% incorrect and 100% invalid, because I'd explained to him that the official story was that this was a reflection, and I had outruled that, but he still was of the belief it was a reflection. But as I say, I knew I had done the work, and the science, as I say, established what this was. So I knew I was in the right, and I proceeded to go on to publish this information and corroborating evidence the UFO investigation of the millennium on July 8th, 2012. 2014, published corroborating evidence. And then the following September, I travelled down to Holmfirth to meet with the late great Stanton Friedman, and also promote my book at the UFO Truth Conference held by Jabberwock Chancellor Gary Heseltine. But the bottom line is that I got to meet Stanton Friedman through it, and shared dinner with Stanton Friedman, or rather let my dinner go cold in front of him, while I conversed intensely with him over what brought me to the table to be at that conference and be sitting with him. And as it turns out, as I explained why I was enraged at the Ministry of Defence reply when they stated that there was no corroborating evidence, the very fact that I had witnessed and observed military jets chasing them on 2 different mornings, I knew that the Ministry of Defence had written me a letter lying to me, and I didn't want to take that lying down, and that is what spurred on the investigation. And as it turns out, that is the exact same reason why Stanton Friedman got involved in ufology. It was the fact that as he looked into it, he realised that he was being lied to as well, and that was what spurred him on, because he didn't like being lied to. He doesn't take liars lightly, especially when he can prove them wrong, and I am of the same ilk. So talking of which, it was that year that I also met with the Jabberwock self-proclaimed cokehead, Larry Warren, the Jabberwock who falsely claimed he was part of the Rendlesham Forest incidents, and also claims that he was the original whistleblower to the case, which is absolute UAP. And in case you forgot earlier on, UAP stands for Universally Accepted Piffle. So that's where I met Mr. Warren, an absolute Jabberwock Chancellor, and that leads into the next 3 years of my ufological studies, which I'll talk about in the next video, because in 2018 I made further earth-shaking discoveries while looking into these NASA mission records, and found further evidence that this object here was not a reflection, as was claimed by MUFON's image expert Mark D'Antonio in 2013 and 2021. But that's subject for another video. So ladies and gentlemen, there is a little bit of my UFO research that spans from 2001 all the way through to 2014, 2015, and I'll go into it more in another video, but for the time being it's now 11 minutes past 2 and it's time for my bed. So with that being an hour, I'll just wrap it up here, and you're more than welcome to come back and listen to me babble about all this crazy stuff in the next one, where I will continue with what took place over the course of 2015 through into 2018 and what went on to become Operation Wheelbarrow, which was a reinvigorated effort to go back and reevaluate these mission images, looking for further evidence of these objects in orbit. And it gets really interesting from here on in. So there we are, folks. There's that for the time being. This is a solid structured physical craft in orbit, and I have now forensically matched it to scores of historical UFO reports, and the evidence on these NASA mission images helped to go on and identify craft seen all over the world for the last 80 years. So with that, I'm going to go and grab my gun and bring the cat in, and hopefully we'll get talking to you all later. But for the meantime, bedways is bedways. I'm going to go and get some spatchka, and I'll see you all in the next one. So with that, good night, God bless, and thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate anyone that pays any attention in what I have to say after 25 years embedded in the Marianas Trench of ufology, keep my head below the parapet, and trying to stay under the radar and not draw too much attention to myself. I previously had a website, corroboratingevidence.com, and I had a visitors map on that, where I had this little globe, and anyone that logged on to the website would come up in a big flag or a big bar. So you had this rotating globe with all these big bars that would come out it, and the length of the bar would increase with the amount of time spent on the website. And it just so happens that I had numerous visitations from the middle of Australia, and as it turns out, there's nothing out there but Alice Springs. So it was clear that I was drawing attention by official parties away out in Alice Springs and away out in the outback. So someone was monitoring what I had to say at the time, so that was quite eerie. And actually, when I spoke to a New Zealander, I ended up speaking with a researcher from New Zealand at one point. While chatting away to him, he got back to me and he says, your PC is super hot. He says, I've had 86 pings, or 86 security alerts since I've started talking to you. He says, you're getting watched. And then he went, it's a way up to like 98 or something. He says, you know, your PC is hot. So I was talking to him about events in Australia, but this guy was using a Mac Pro or something, and he was like, there's something going on with your computer, pal. He's, you're getting monitored. So that was all mental, and obviously reinforced what I'd already found out through my visitors map. I don't exactly expect to, there's nothing out there but Alice Springs. So it was like, whoa, somebody's monitoring my work. So that's what I'm saying. I've tried to keep a low profile over the years, and you know, maintain a low profile basically, and then, you know, pop up when the time is right and go, ha ha, you know, and give it the whole Black Knight effort. you know. But so yeah, I don't mean the Black Knight satellite. I'm talking about Monty Python. You know, I end up in the arms and the legs and all that. Just but a scratch. Anyway, with that, ladies and gents, I will lobbies and leavies. Talking about Monty Python, I ended up using the Wabbit as a sort of mascot. A little bunny with a big sharp pointy teeth. That was like me, and you had all the knights were all wearing. They all had NASA logos and all that carry on. So I thought a wee bit of fun. This rabbit attacking everybody with my book. It was quite funny. So yeah, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of stupid humans out there. There is a lot of people that have fell for the Bob Lazar story, propagated by George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell and Bob Lazar himself. A lot of people fell for that hook, line and sinker. Element 115, Hocus Pocus, they're powered by Hocus Pocus people, and I managed to steal some of the Hocus Pocus out of Los Alamos, and George knows where the Hocus Pocus is buried. So there's a lot of people that fall for all that pish, and it is really disheartening when you get the likes of myself. I'm like, as far as I'm concerned with ufology, I really don't like the Jabberwocks within it, because it was the same with Larry Warren. When these people come out and talk utter pish, it only does a disservice to genuine researchers and genuine eyewitnesses who all get tarred with the same brush. And this is why the other 98% of the world's population that isn't into UFOs all seem to think that we're all running about with tinfoil hats on. And that's why I get uptight when I see all these Jabberwocks that are not doing ufology any favours with their tall tales about running into entities in Rendlesham Forest and so forth. So that really pisses me off. But as I say, people are easily fooled, and that is what has been going on since 2017, when we had the To the Stars Academy announcement to bring forward Chris Mellon and Louis Elizondo, two chancellors that have come out and just jabberwocked our way through to this point, and the receipts point to just jabberwocks. So I am really taken back by just how stupid humans can really be, and their need to, I want to believe, somehow manage to override their common sense and their sense of belief leads the way instead of critical thinking. Again, critical thinking, this is something that Mark D'Antonio tried to lecture me about in 2021 on a live podcast. Critical thinking, you know. Oh my goodness. So I was slagged something rotten in 2021, but we'll come back to that later. Anyway, I've got the last laugh on all this, so that's the bottom line, and I'm really looking forward to getting a public apology from both Mark D'Antonio and MUFON for the way in which myself and my evidence was treated, in light of them meant to be some sort of scientific institution for the benefit of all mankind. So the way in which an eyewitness was treated after a decade and then 2 decades of research, I found it quite appalling, and that's why I really demand a public apology from both parties, or both that individual and his parent organisation. So, as I say, I'm not bitter. I'm just not going to take any crap off anyone and let them get away with it, especially when they're in the wrong. So that is a long short of it, and ladies and gentlemen, I've been babbling for almost 70 minutes here, and I have a cat to go through and grab and use as a pillow for the next 8 hours. So with that, over and out. Roger. May the force be with you and all that jazz. And as I say, feel free to come back and pick up where we left off tonight. So my name is James Welsh. I am a multiple event close range eyewitness who has spent the last 25 years involved in this subject, and I have conducted real research, and I have obtained real results as a result of the real research and the real experiences. So with that, good night, God bless, and thank you for tuning in. And I'm just a procrastinator, can't say cheerio. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, I'll catch you on the next one. Good night.